2023 was the warmest on record, both on land and in sea. A clear sign that human-induced climate change is not under control. It's brought back discussions of geoengineering, a solution which is causing Dr. Kevin TRENBERTH some concern. Well, we're joined now by Dr. TRENBERTH, Distinguished Scholar at the National Centre for Atmospheric Research and an Honorary Academic at the University of Auckland. Kevin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Explain to us what geoengineering actually is.
That refers to various kinds of activities that are designed to cool the planet in some fashion. Often it means trying to brighten or change the amount of cloudiness in some way to reflect more of the sun's rays back to space. This is to counter global warming, and the global warming is primarily caused by the increases in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, primarily carbon dioxide, methane, and some others. But the hacking of the planet, so-called, is designed instead to stop some of the sunshine from warming the planet. And so it doesn't really fix the problem, but it does counter some of the warming that is otherwise going on.
So let me ask you then, is it viable? Is it viable economically? Is it viable scientifically?
I think there are many issues, and you've raised some of them. One of them is the cost issue. Once you start doing this activity, because it doesn't change the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the carbon dioxide continues to increase, it doesn't really address the problem. That means once you start something, you have to do it forever, and the costs continue to increase, and yet you're still not really addressing the central issue. I think the biggest issue, though, is one relating to ethical issues. Who is really in control? The climate change that is going on at the moment is primarily caused by human activities, but it's inadvertent. It's a side effect of all of our other activities, all of the industry and the driving of cars and burning of coal and so on. Whereas now we're talking about deliberate attempts to change the climate. And so who, on behalf of all of humanity, is in charge to determine how the climate might change in some fashion? And so I think the ethical issue is actually the biggest issue, in addition to the fact that you're spending a lot of money and you have to keep spending it, and it doesn't really solve the problem.
Do you have a solution, or in your view, what is the solution then if geoengineering should be taken off the table for the reasons that you've just described?
Yeah, I have a little fable that I used in my article. I wonder if I should quickly go through that.
Please do. For
people. So, once upon a time in an idyllic country near a small town and a farming community, a rope hung from the sky. And one pull of the rope changed the weather from fine and sunny to cloudy and rainy. And the next pull changed it back. And for many years, the people cooperated. The farmers used the rains to help grow crops, and the townspeople enjoyed the sunny periods. But there came a time when the townspeople protested the rain and wanted more sunshine. And the farmers were concerned about their crops, and so the arguments broke out, with one person from the town pulling the rope, quickly followed by a farmer pulling it again, and they pulled and pulled, and they broke the rope. And so this highlights the idea that who is in charge of the rope on behalf of us all? And so, the real alternative, of course, is to stop the global warming from happening in the first place. And the big emphasis there is on cutting emissions, cutting down on the use of fossil fuels, cutting down on internal combustion engines and using more electric cars, decarbonizing the economy. And there's quite a lot of activities, some of which are quite promising in this respect around the world, but they're having trouble keeping up because there's more and more people and more demands. And so increases in demands for electricity are being dealt with by the renewable energy from solar and wind and hydroelectric power, all very good sources. But we're not making much in the way of inroads at the moment, although it's primarily two countries that are causing the biggest problems at the moment.
So what do you see as the solution then? Is there a way that we can catch up?
It's interesting to see what's going on in China. China is the biggest contributor at the moment and the biggest issue with regard to increases from one year to the next. India is second. They're both very large populations. And the U.S. has been the biggest contributor historically. And that matters because carbon dioxide has a long lifetime. And so it's really the cumulative emissions which matter. And China is very rapidly catching up on the United States. The United States has actually cut back on emissions somewhat. I think China and the U.S. together could really solve this problem to a very large degree if they put their minds to it. And then the peer pressure would require other countries to follow suit. At the moment, there's been a meeting of the G7, for instance, and they have decided that they're indeed going to cut down on emissions and coal burning in particular by 2030, for instance. That certainly helps, but it really requires stronger leadership, and China doesn't seem to be quite ready to do that, although it's been remarkable how much progress they've made in terms of things like solar power and in renewable energy, but they're still increasing the number of coal-fired power stations, for instance.